Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to talk about marijuana, the positive and the negative of marijuana. Coming up. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Ernesto from AttaBoyCowBoy, and on this channel we give you health and wealth tips to help you be successful. Now in today's video, I want to talk about marijuana. Now I get a lot of questions about marijuana. I live in California. Weed is legal here and a lot of people are using it. I see dispensaries all over the place. In fact, in most of the buildings that we manage, when we go in, I can smell marijuana like probably half of the time. Now marijuana is becoming more and more common. In fact, someday it might be as common as cigarettes. And I get a lot of questions from people that are really curious. They're asking me, well, this must not be very bad for you because it's legal and I see a lot of people using it. And I tell them, well, let me tell you something. Let me explain to you some of the things I see when I go to hospitals and nursing homes, all that kind of stuff. Now in Los Angeles, we have over 70,000 homeless people. There are homeless people everywhere. There's camps everywhere. There's people parked out everywhere. We're second in the US. New York is number one. I believe they have over 100,000 homeless people. Now some of the places I work at, all I see are homeless patients. And they're people like anybody else. They share their lives. I mean, we talk about a lot of different things. And unfortunately, there are some patterns that I see with a lot of the people that I treat. For one thing, I see that alcohol is probably the most damaging drug that people use these days, in my opinion. Because what happens is when people use alcohol, it usually doesn't kill you right away. It slowly pickles your brain over your lifetime. So what ends up happening is you get damaged brain cells, which causes dementia, memory loss, motor damage, neurological damage, organ damage, all sorts of other things. And as people get older, their body is less able to deal with this damage. I know the other day I was talking to this guy who was an electrician, really interesting guy. He told me he worked 40 years for the city of Huntington Beach, and he made a lot of money, retired, had a great pension, had a house, had everything. But then he retired, he had nothing better to do, so he started drinking more and more and more. And he basically explained how everything in his life just went down a tube. He ended up losing everything. He ended up living in the street. And basically he was telling me that he would look forward to getting his government check every month so that he could check into a hotel, take a shower, eat some warm meals, lay in a soft bed, watch a TV, and just enjoy himself for about 3 days. He said that's all he could afford. After that, he had to go back to the street for the rest of the month. And basically, his day consisted of waking up early, begging for 2 or 3 hours just to get enough to buy one beer, which is a big can, a King Cobra he told me to buy. He'd have his beer, then he'd go out to the street, beg some more, get enough money to buy lunch, then go back to the street, beg some more, get enough to get some more beers in the evening, and then go to sleep. Next day, get up and same thing over again. And you know, this is a common pattern I'll hear from a lot of people that are homeless. They basically live to buy their drug of choice, which oftentimes is alcohol. And when I tell people that, they say, well, why alcohol? Alcohol is not that bad. That's a good question. It's alcohol because the people that are using marijuana, heroin, cocaine, meth, fentanyl, painkillers, everything else, they're dead. They don't make it. That's why we don't see a lot of them. I see them in the drug rehabs that I work at. I see quite a bit of them. But those people tend to be young, 20s, teens, or 30s. The alcohol people are all ages, but a lot of them tend to be older because they actually make it. The other people die. They don't make it. They die off. So now what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot of young people coming into the hospitals, coming into the nursing homes, and I'm talking to them and I'm like, okay, how old are you? 25, 27? I'm like, okay. And what do you use? What substances do you use? And they'll say, well, I just smoke marijuana. And I thought, wow, I thought marijuana wasn't very bad for you. So I started doing some research, and I found some very interesting information. And again, let me just give a disclaimer here. I don't personally have anything against any of the drugs. I personally feel that all drugs should be legalized. I think that would make things a lot easier. It would eliminate a lot of the drug crime that we have in the world. That's just my personal opinion. What I found in my research is that the marijuana that people are smoking now is not the one that people were smoking in the 60s at Woodstock. The one that we use now has been bioengineered. So it's 10, 20 times stronger sometimes. It's much stronger than the marijuana people used to use. Yes, it is natural. I hear a lot from patients say, but it's natural. Yeah, it's natural, but so is mercury. And so is cyanide. And so is a lot of things that are really toxic and can kill you immediately. That's not an excuse because it's natural. Oil is natural. That doesn't mean I'm gonna get a quart of oil and drink it down. I'd be dead. So don't look at it as natural or not natural. That's not a good argument. Look at it as what the damage is going to be to your body, the load you're going to do. So remember, I got to live my whole life with this body. If I have a car and I damage that car, I can go do some auto body work, or I can just go trade it in and get a new car. But you can't do that with your body. I have this body for this entire life till I start a new life. So this body's going to last me till however old I end up being, 80, 90, 70, who knows. So you can't trade it in. So if you keep damaging your body, you're going to have to live with that clunker your whole life, right? You don't want to trash your car. You're going to have to be driving around with it all the time, especially if you can't afford to buy a new one. In this case, it doesn't matter if you can afford it. You're stuck with the same body for your whole life. So first thing is that marijuana is much stronger. So it's going to do a lot more damage than the old marijuana. The second thing, this is really interesting. I started seeing this about 10, 15 years ago in the hospitals. Patients would come in, they were 20 something years old, they had a heart attack, they had a stroke, and we were like, wow, how did this guy have a heart attack or stroke? Usually people that have heart attacks and strokes are much older. They do some blood tests, they find heroin, they find painkillers, they find all kinds of drugs in their blood. And I'll talk to the person, they'll tell me, I'll ask them, what happened? What were you doing? I was having some beers, I smoked a little weed. They don't have any reason to lie to me. Sometimes people do, but for the most part, no. People are being honest. And I'll tell them, well, hey, did you know that we found some heroin in your blood? They're like, wow. You can tell from the look on their face. When you work with people every day, you really learn how to read them. And I've worked with thousands of people. They're not lying, they're honest. Some of them start crying, like, what do you mean heroin? What I've found over time, from talking to patients, from talking to drug users, from talking to even drug dealers, is that most drugs are laced, particularly marijuana. In fact, over 70% of marijuana that you buy on the streets is laced. It's laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl is a painkiller. It's 10 times stronger than heroin. And a lot of it is coming in illegally through China. It's made in labs. It's very, very deadly. When you hear the drug crisis in the United States, they're usually talking about fentanyl. It's a painkiller. It's very, very, very dangerous. And what the drug cartels and drug dealers and all these types of folks do, they get marijuana, they'll get a sprayer. Like the kind you use to kill the weeds in your yard? They'll put food coloring in it. Blue, green, red, orange, you name it. And they'll say, okay, here's the blue one. We're going to mix some heroin in here. Here's the orange one. We're going to mix painkillers. They'll dissolve the painkillers in the fluid with the food coloring, and they'll spray over that marijuana and they'll let it dry in the sun. Then that marijuana has a color. They'll bag it up, and if you've ever seen marijuana, sometimes they sell it in colors. If you've never seen that before, Google the marijuana they sell in Amsterdam, or go to Amsterdam sometime, and you'll see they have bubble gum and midnight blue and all these really cool names. They have different colors. and they have different strengths. They have different percentages of THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana. It's the ingredient that gives you that feeling of being high. So that is also added to the marijuana. Though they extract THC, they concentrate in liquids. They'll actually add it to some of the other marijuanas to make them stronger. So you may buy some marijuana and you may think you're just smoking marijuana, but you may not, that might not be the case. You might actually be smoking PCP, heroin, crack. You don't know what's in it. And some of my patients were asking me, well, why would someone buy illegal marijuana if it's legal? That's another good question, because it's much cheaper. It's economics. Marijuana that is legal is much more expensive. There's taxes added to it. A doctor usually has to prescribe it. All those things are value-added taxes that make it a lot more expensive than street marijuana. That's why most people still prefer street marijuana, illegal marijuana. And it's actually much stronger because it has these additives. And I would say probably 90-some% of people are not even aware that there's additives added to it. They know it has a different name. They just figure it's a different marijuana plant. They have no idea what they're smoking, what they're putting into their body. So unfortunately, a lot of those people end up getting hooked on other drugs because they're not able to get the same high they initially got. Let's say you smoked some marijuana that had crack in it and you got really high and you felt really good. The next time you go and it's just regular marijuana, you're gonna say, hey, that wasn't very good. I didn't get very high. I'm gonna go back for the old stuff. And then after a while, your body gets used to it. You're not gonna get the same high you used to get. So then you start looking for bigger and better things. That's why they say that marijuana is called a gateway drug. 90% of people that use marijuana use other drugs for that very reason. Now my patient was asking me, well, why? What makes me want to use more and more? All right, let's say you have a birthday party. Someone brings you a cake and some presents. You're gonna get, wow, you're gonna get really excited. Your brain's gonna release some hormones called endorphins. They're called the feel-good neurotransmitters, and they make you feel ecstatic, right? That's called a natural high. You'll get that from hanging out with your buddies, laughing, watching a funny movie, going to a birthday party, running, doing things that you enjoy. That's called a natural high. That's healthy. It's normal. It feels good. Now, let's say you use some crack or some marijuana or something like that. It actually forces your brain to release extra doses of those endorphins, those feel-good neurotransmitters. And you're gonna feel really good. The only problem is that they're excreted by cells in your brain. And when you force those cells to overproduce and overproduce and overproduce, they get tired. And a lot of them start giving out. They start dying off. So you actually start losing a lot of those feel-good cells. So when I work in drug rehabs, one of the things I always notice is what they call a flat affect. You'll talk to the person and they're not very animated. You know, like right now I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm looking, you know, I look happy. But you'll talk to these guys and they talk really dry, they're boring, their voice is kind of monotonous, they're not very emotional. That's called having a flat affect. Unfortunately, those folks have overstimulated those cells in their brain so much, they destroyed the capacity to produce endorphin. So they actually produce less and less and less. So what happens is when someone actually gives them a cake and presents, a lot of times they're not even gonna get excited. They're not gonna feel that happiness that they once felt in their life. And you can never recover that. It's permanent brain damage. So what ends up happening is those people suffer. They want to feel good. They want to feel happy. They can't. They can't find happiness. So what do? They use more and more drugs and stronger drugs to try to get to that point in their life again where they can feel good. Unfortunately, what happens is depression sets in, and then unfortunately there's a lot of suicide. Suicide is very, very high in drug users. A lot of the places I've worked at, yeah, we'll see a lot of suicide. In fact, some people are on 24-hour suicide watch. They'll have an orderly or a nurse assistant stand right at the doorway 24 hours a day watching the patient. They're on suicide watch. I've went in to see patients and they're 20 years old. And I'll talk to that patient and they're very, very sad. They got something called dysthymia, which is a chronic depression. They just cannot kick it. Unfortunately, a lot of times they destroyed a lot of that capacity to produce those feel-good hormones. So they will never be able to enjoy their life like they once did. It's a very, very unfortunate situation. And that's what I see with a lot of people that over consume drugs. It causes a lot of depression, a lot of suicide, and it causes a lot of this sadness in their life. It's a really sad thing for me to see because I want to help these people, and we talk about their problems, we talk about everything they're doing, and they're really good people. Just because you use drugs or alcohol or whatever you do, that doesn't make you a bad person. It's just like anything else. People just do what they do, but you have to suffer the consequences. And unfortunately, a lot of people are not aware of the lifelong consequences that come with that recreational fun they might have thought they were having. So when you think about using marijuana or drinking or heroin or whatever the case might be, think about the repercussions in terms of your long-term happiness. You might be trading in your long-term happiness for short-term gain. And that is just something that I try to make folks aware of so that they know what they're getting themselves into. When you go to a dispensary or you go somewhere to buy some marijuana, no one's going to explain to you that you're mortgaging your future happiness for the happiness that you might feel in the short term. So what ends up happening is these people are going down a road that they're not quite aware of and that they did not expect. One last point I want to make about marijuana, because I just had an 18-year-old asking me this the other day. Well, can I just do marijuana every once in a while? Of course you can. You can do whatever you want. It's your life. And you can use things in moderation. It's going to have less of an effect on your life, just like alcohol. I know a lot of people that drink. They drink wine, they drink beer, they watch football games, whatever the case might be. But you have to do things in moderation. And remember, marijuana is much stronger than a lot of other things. So smoking a little marijuana is not the same as having a six-pack. And again, you don't know if that marijuana is laced. So be careful with what you're buying. If you can afford it, buy stuff that's actually regulated. So you're much safer and much better off than buying stuff in the street. You don't know what you're getting yourself into when you buy marijuana that's illegal. And you're also supporting drug cartels and all these other types of people that are creating a lot of violence and unhappiness in the world. So don't support that. Buy it legally. At least you're paying taxes. That goes to schools and, you know, police officers and all the other things that we need here to function as a society. And the other point I mentioned to this guy is he was asking me about success. I told him, well, listen, you got to look at it this way. One thing is success. You're a doctor, you're an engineer, you work for the city of, you know, New York or San Francisco or whatever. The other thing is marijuana. Marijuana is over here. In some cases, success is over here. Some cases you can do both. But I'll tell you one thing, if you want to be a doctor or a nurse or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist or a scientist or a lot of these things, or you want to work for the government, they drug test. So you can't really do marijuana and do a lot of these things. Even being an electrician. Right now I'm studying at a vocational school with some other folks, and our professor is talking to us about marijuana. You get drug tested. They don't want you to be smoking marijuana and be in the job. That can cause a lot of injuries, a lot of problems. So a lot of times it's not really going to go hand in hand. If you want to do marijuana, you're going to kind of hit a ceiling in a lot of things that you do in life. It just doesn't go hand in hand with doing a lot of things that are really successful in life. There are some cases that does happen, but for the most part, it doesn't. It doesn't work together. They just don't jab. Marijuana does not lead to success usually. So that's just one other thing you want to take into consideration. But again, I just want to present you with the information so you can use it to make an informed choice of what you think is best for you. Thank you again for listening from East Los Angeles. This is Dr. Ernesto, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.